You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Monica, let's talk about HB 107, the repeal of the three strikes law. Can you walk us through that bill and why it's important to repeal the bill, the three strikes law? Because there are folks out there that are going to say like, hey, they had three chances. And three strikes and you're out. Those are just the rules. Why should people get to commit more than three crimes in their life?
Mm-hmm. I think, and that's going to go into a whole can of worms of like just personal opinions. But some of the things that we can focus on, and I think something that all of us can collectively agree on, is Alabama's prison crisis at this point is something that everyone has been concerned with. And, since we got the DOJ report, that's something that's also been in the forefront as it relates to overcrowding. HFOA is a major contributor to overcrowding in Alabama's prisons. And it's really just past time for the legislators just to repeal it. It would be definitely a significant step towards easing that current overcrowding crisis, reducing the cost of long-term incarceration, and also just giving people a chance to be redeemed and re-enter society. So, of course, it was passed in 1977, just to give some background on it. And thousands of Alabamians have served like longer prison times than those not sentenced under HFOA. And so it just creates this widespread sentencing disparity throughout ADOC. There's currently 504 people that are serving life without parole under HFOA, and 1,110 of them are serving life. 3 out of 4 of those people are Black. And at least 300 people serving life without parole have no homicide or sex crimes on their records, right? So you have people that are serving these life sentences for crimes that honestly are not violent crimes. And so it begs the question again, you asked at the beginning, because, people will say, hey, why should people get more than one chance? You have to look at those numbers and look at that data and see that you have people serving for crimes that could honestly be forgiven. So despite any new sentencing guidelines, lawmakers have still left HFOA on the books for prosecutors to use at their discretion. And honestly, the disparities that people experience under HFOA is really prominent at this point. So even the people who feel like they've had all of their chances, we can at least view this from the Alabama overcrowded prisons crisis at this point and say, hey, this relieves some of that. So it's at a standstill currently. It is still in committee. It hasn't made a whole lot of progress over the past few weeks prior to the legislature actually going into recess. But that's also hope, because it doesn't mean that, that it's died. But it's something that we wholeheartedly support. Representative England, who is the sponsor of this bill, has received support from judges as well as district attorneys. And so even though it is I would honestly say this is also bipartisan legislation as well. It just goes into the category of, hey, some people just don't like it. But it's definitely something that at this point should be more priority and not some of the other legislation that's been currently brought up.
Yeah, say that number again. How many people have been convicted under the Habitual Offender Act that are not guilty of homicide or sex crimes?
500, 300, at least 300.
That's 300 out of the 500.
300. So there are 504 people that are serving life without parole under HFOA, 1,110 are serving life. And 300 of those people serving life without parole have no homicide or sex crimes on their record.
I mean, that's just wild. Like I don't care, how many, I don't care if it's your 6th time stealing a loaf of bread. Like, you shouldn't have life in prison. I mean, that's just, it's silly. And there was a really good profile, wasn't it, in the Montgomery Advertiser about somebody who had done almost exactly that. There was like just this real petty theft that you know, it was like $2 or $3 or something, and he's been in prison for decades now.
You're probably thinking of Mr. Kincaid from Birmingham that Alabama Appleseed worked with, who got out recently, but who was serving under HFOA. And that is, I'm sorry, Mr. Kennard. That is part of this as well, is that there are so many older, mostly men in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who are serving in these prisons. And we need to reckon with, as a state and as a society, with the fact that what we have sentenced these people to is not life in prison or life without parole in prison, but it is death in prison. And so we have sentenced people to die in Alabama's prisons. And until you have read much about or looked at pictures of or visited one of Alabama's prisons, you really need to think about what that is for, like you said, stealing a few dollars when they were very young, going into an unoccupied shed and taking your lawnmower, or, having a little bit too much marijuana. It's just a really broken system. Or perhaps I should say it's a system that's working exactly as it's designed, and we should redesign it.